gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Griffith, 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it very much. Appreciate all the witnesses being here. As you might gather, Mr. Dingell and I do not agree on this point, although I respect him greatly and appreciate his contributions over the many decades to this committee. And obviously, whenever you have a law on the books, it is Congress's obligation to review it, make sure it makes sense, and each Congress has a separate obligation to do that, and we come to somewhat different conclusions. Mr. Lentz, I noticed with some interest on your summary of major points at the very last point, you said it would impose a major administrative burden on employers and result to referring to the large employer auto-enroll requirement and result in an unexpected payroll deduction for many employees who do not want it or need coverage. Am I to assume that you're referring to perhaps the husband whose wife has a much better plan with her employer, and now he's going to be automatically enrolled, albeit his wife has a better plan and already has a family plan for them and their children? Is that the type of thing you're referencing?
That would be one example.
And would another example be the one that a constituent came to me with last year, or a similar situation, where a student full-time enrolled in college also held a full-time job and through the Affordable Care Act was forced off of their parents' plan because they were eligible through their employer, and then they ended up having to spend more money because obviously being a part of a family plan with their parents, it was free, but now because they were doing what I hope my kids will have the fortitude to do, carry a full-time load and at school and a full-time job, it ended up costing them several $1,000s a year. Would that be another example of that kind of a problem that this Act is just not ready for?
Yes, sir.
And I would ask the gentleman also, I noticed that on page 5 of your testimony you indicate that the one-year delay of the employer requirements means employers will not have penalty exposure until 2015, but they must still have their information technology and human resources systems in place by January 1, 2014 in order to track employers' hours of service in 2014 and comply with the ACA coverage obligations on January 1, 2015. But I would ask you, Mr. Lentz, has your organization taken into consideration what happens if the courts determine that the President didn't have the authority? And I ask this question because I can't find where in the bill the President has the authority to delay the employer mandate. What if a court finds, let's say next September, that the President didn't have that authority, you all have got the records, aren't your employers then responsible for going back in and reimbursing the cost of that health insurance to their employees that they thought they weren't mandated to provide, but now they are, if they hadn't provided something that would have been in compliance with ACA as of January 1, 2014?
Well, that would be quite a conundrum.
And isn't it a possibility, understanding that there's nothing directly authorizing the President to have delayed the employer mandate and recognizing that we do live in a litigious society?
We do indeed, sir.
And so this conundrum could be a great detriment to many employers in the United States. And isn't it also just one of the thousands of examples out there of why you're concerned about employers not knowing what the rules are and what they have to do and what's coming next as a part of this Act?
There are multiple opportunities for unforeseen consequences here.
There are indeed. There are indeed. I would go back to Mr. Graham. I was reminded when you were talking about the fraud, and I know you don't want to get on record as to what percentages of fraud or whether it'll be more or less, and I understand that. But a friend of mine once explained to me, and I thought it made good sense, that locks are just there to help keep the honest men and women honest, and that's why you have locks, because if there's somebody who really wants to get into your house or get into your car, they're going to figure out a way to get in. And so doesn't it cause you some concern that we don't have proper locks in place on fraud when it comes to this particular Act and the various requirements that you say what your income is or don't say what your income is?
When I ride my bicycle to work, I lock it up.
Yes, sir. I appreciate your answer. Mr. Chairman, unless somebody wants my last 30 seconds, I yield back.
Chair thanks the gentleman, and now recognize the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Bilirakis.